Welcome, everybody, to Everyday Ethics, episode 11. We today are doing, we're going to actually begin a series on criminal rehabilitation. I really hope everybody enjoys it. So, to start with, if you're going to talk about rehabilitating a criminal, if you're going to talk about anything, treating anybody, helping anybody, you have to know what the nature of the problem with which you're dealing, right? My go-to on this is somebody who, at the end of his life, I actually got to know a little bit after reading his books for 2 decades in prison. And that is the late Dr. Stanton Samanow, who, in conjunction with the late Dr. Samuel Yochelson, compiled the 3-volume set, The Criminal Personality, in which they put forward 52 criminal thinking processes or criminal thinking errors that they were able to identify. Now, I'm not going to go over all 52 because we would be here until the cows come home. So instead, what we are going to do is use Brent McCall in my book, Down the Rabbit Hole, How the Culture of Corrections Encourages Crime, and the thinking errors that he and I used in here. So if anybody is really interested in Dr. Samanow and Dr. Yochelson and their theory, you can look them up or you can buy their books. You can do that. But for our purposes, I think it will suffice if we just use the summary that Brent and I used. As always, thank you so much for being here. And remember that we do have super chats and super stickers, and they are always greatly, greatly appreciated. So without further ado, I suppose we should just dive right in. Now, the first one that we identified was victim stance. And the way we describe this, hello to Teresa, the way that we describe this is the criminal imagines himself an exceptional person who deserves to have the world at his feet. He feels like he is special and unique and that others should acknowledge that by treating him the way someone of his stature should be treated. And when the world fails to live up to his lofty expectations, which is inevitably the case, the criminal feels wrong. The slightest inconvenience results in him feeling like he has been ill-used in some way. So the way that this often manifests itself is, for instance, like I told you, my parents were both drug addicts. I was taught to be a criminal, and I always use that as the excuse, right? It's not my fault the way that I am. It's society's fault. It's my parents' fault. Whatever it is, it's not my fault. And so when I was arrested and held accountable, I felt like the victim. And one can see this in prison with guys complaining all the time, whether it be about racism or discrimination or growing up poor, or they were given too much time, whatever. That person is the victim. So one of the things that has to be overcome is this idea that criminals have that they're the victim. To anticipate a little bit is the criminal needs to be shown ultimately that he is far more of a victimizer than he has ever been a victim. And I know this is certainly true in my case. So the next one that we dealt with is what the doctors called power thrust. This is vital for understanding criminals. Criminals want to feel in control. They want to feel like they have power over other people. The criminal tends to look at the world in terms of strength and weakness, and this holds true for how he views himself as well. The criminal does not recognize gradations between being the alpha male and being an absolute zero. For him, one is either top dog or nothing, and in an effort to ward off feelings of nothingness, the criminal continually strives to demonstrate that he is a force to be recognized with which to be recognized, and he does this by power thrusting. So you might see this if a criminal, for instance, gets angry, you might see him bang on a table, you might see him act aggressively. You can't talk to me like that type of thing. Don't you dare disrespect me. Whatever it is, the criminal wants to assert dominance over other people, power over other people. And that way he feels better about himself. He feels like the tough guy, the gangster, the badass, whatever the case may be, whatever he's trying to do, he wants to feel like he's the one in control, that he is powerful, and that power exhibits itself over other people. Another one they identified is super optimism. Now, what this means, criminals really think that they're smart. Um, and they develop the idea, the thinking that they're going to get away with whatever crime they commit. Now, in fairness to crooks, we do get away with most of the crimes that we commit, but that doesn't mean it's forever. But criminals nevertheless think they're going to get away with the crimes. If they didn't, the chances are they would not be committing these crimes. I'm just going to share this here on X, and also going to send it to my friend Mark Pellegrino, because I'm hoping that he will share it as well. We just send it to him. So criminals think that they're super smooth, super slick. My mother told me so many times that I was going to end up in prison, and I said, no, 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 not me. I'm far too slick for that. And I remember when I was first incarcerated, I sat down for the mental health evaluation, and my evaluator read from my high school file, and what my high school therapist wrote down. And what my therapist wrote down was, Michael continues to engage in illegal activity, believes he will not get caught. That epitomizes super optimism. And I have to tell you, it was not lost on me that this was being read to me while I was incarcerated, facing, 80, 100 years. Ian Gilmore said, "Would I say that all criminals make excuses for their convictions?" Someone sent me a video of Jordan Peterson interviewing Simone Gold about her January 6th conviction, and it was all about how she was treated. I would say this is very important. I didn't address this, that we have to remember as we go through these thinking errors that these things exist on a continuum, right? So if you say to yourself, well, I do that sometimes, you have to keep in mind that criminals are people that do this stuff to the extreme. So universal propositions like that, Ian, I'm very hesitant, because then somebody goes and finds some crook that I've never heard of who always takes responsibility. Generally speaking, in my experience, criminals make excuses. I can't say that that's going to hold for every single person that has committed a crime, but my bet is, if you put any criminal in front of me, my bet is he has tried to excuse his behavior in his life. That's what he's done. He's tried to excuse, he's tried to justify, he's minimized the effects of his conduct. He exacerbates or magnifies the effect that other people have had on him. He'll be quick to point out all the wrongs done to him. So yeah, I would be confident in betting that any individual criminal has made excuses. I can't guarantee it, though, in every single case. But it does not surprise me that this woman complained about how she was treated, and just goes right over all the harm that she's caused. But yeah, so criminals, we believe we're going to get away with the crimes we commit. And if we didn't, we likely wouldn't commit the crime. Something else that the doctors talked about is corrosion and cutoff. This is a process by which we eliminate from our minds deterrence, right? So for instance, the idea that I might get caught for a crime, push that out of my head. The guilt, the anticipated guilt that I might feel, I put that out of my head. The fear that I might feel from a fight or from anything else, I put that off. It goes away, and then, like a surgical incision, they say, you cut it off. My personal experience with this is when I was 14 years old, and I may have already told the story, but if I haven't, it's fine. And I wanted to hang with the tough guys. And I was hanging out in Hartford. We were walking on the street, and my friends wanted to mug a guy. And I didn't want to do it. I was afraid, but I went along because I wanted to fit in. And we really beat the hell out of this kid pretty badly. And I went home that night and I felt so horrible about myself. I felt extreme guilt for what I had done. And I pushed that feeling out of my head. I could not take that feeling of guilt. So I cut it off. I pushed it out. And after that, every time it became easier and easier to get rid of that guilt. And for the objectivist watching the show, it might not be lost on you that this is similar to the idea of evasion, where people deliberately don't see things they don't like. Criminals excel at this, at cutting off the things that they don't like, whether it be fear of consequences, fear of the ensuing guilt, whatever. This one here, Brett and I speculated that if criminals could be cured of this one that I'm going to talk about next, they would likely not be criminals anymore. And this is called concrete thinking. And while we were researching this book, we ran across one of those terse lines that tends to resonate because it captures the essence of an issue. We have forgotten who wrote it or in which book it appeared. I believe I know who it was now, but I think it was Steve Walsh, and the book was Criminology, The Essentials. I'm pretty sure. But anyways, the author observed that criminals are children grown strong. This, of course, is demonstrated by a variety of criminal characteristics, from emotional immaturity to an unwillingness to plan ahead or delay gratification to a subjectivist orientation to the world. But if one pays particularly close attention, perhaps nowhere is the criminal's juvenescence more clearly demonstrated than in his concrete bound mentality. In terms of level of abstraction, the criminal's cognitive functioning tends to resemble that of a child's more than of an adult. Criminals don't think abstractly, right? So you may have a typical example of a criminal who gets caught selling. Say he gets caught selling heroin on one street. He then says, the problem is where I sold the drug. I sold the drug on, Sullivan Avenue. Let me go and sell it on Spruce Street, as if by moving his location, he's going to get away. If he gets caught there, he'll move to another street. Or maybe he'll say, well, the problem is that I was selling heroin. Had I sold cocaine, it's a less serious drug, I'll be more likely to get away with it. Or maybe I'll switch to marijuana. He doesn't understand the principle that when you put yourself at odds with the powers that be, with the law on a regular basis, you're going to end up in trouble. That is the fact. But he doesn't understand that it's not the fact that he's selling a particular drug in a particular place isn't the reason that he's getting arrested. The problem is with what he's doing. Similarly, the criminal thinks in short range. I want this and I want it now. He doesn't understand that today's actions have effects that redound for years and years into the future. He thinks about the now. He doesn't think about how, if he commits a robbery, the reverberating effects. For instance, if he robs a store, he might say, oh, well, they can afford it. He doesn't understand, well, what about the psychological effects on the people that he robbed? What about the fact that prices have to be higher because stores have to compensate for the fact that they could be robbed, or that the person has to pay higher insurance premiums? Criminals think very, very, very concretely. Mr. Deagle wants to know if I have insight into serial killers or others who commit gruesome crimes. In terms of thought processes, the doctors, Samenow and Yokelson, say all criminals are fundamentally the same, in that we all commit these errors, whether it be a burglar, a robber, a rapist, a serial killer, whatever. And I can say this, that in my experience, and there's a lot of it, with dealing with criminals, including in programs, to a man, every single person exhibited the thinking errors that the doctors put forward. It did not matter who, what that person was in jail for. It's always the same. No name, you say, how so? I'm giving it to you right now. I'm giving you the thinking errors, the thought processes that criminals engage in. And by the way, the doctors also said to fix this problem, they know of no other task known to man that is harder than this one. So fragmentation is the next one we'll go over. And fragmentation is the criminal is notorious for starting something only to abandon it when it becomes difficult or monotonous. If something he is involved in fails to deliver the stimulation he desires, he simply moves on to something that will. Sustained focus and effort are antithetical to the criminal's worldview. He refuses to tolerate the drudgery that he sees as characterizing the lives of ordinary people. Consequently, his life is marked by a pattern of moving from one thing to the next while he accomplishes very little. That is very, very true. Criminals will start something, then stop. They'll jump from one thing to the next, but it also takes place in the thinking. And this also has to do with, what is the word I'm looking for here? The concrete thinking we mentioned before. So you can be in a group with a criminal and you're having a conversation, and that criminal will exhibit so much insight. He's gotten it. It's come through. He understands it. The next group, it's as if you never had the conversation. He's right back to the same things. Fragmentation, concrete thinking. It's reminiscent to me of when Leonard Peikoff talks about Ayn Rand, and she was talking about the dangers of economic controls. And, the person says, okay, so economic control aren't good in this industry, but what about in this industry? Because the person was unable to think in principle. Criminals have a fundamental, I'm not going to say inability, but they fundamentally don't think in principle. So they have to learn to do so, which, by the way, no easy task, not at all. So sentimentality. Criminals have a sentimental side to them. They feel bad when, maybe they'll feel bad for when they see a puppy get killed, or they see somebody get robbed, or see somebody homeless on the street. They will feel really, really bad about this. Criminals tend to, they'll deify their moms, for instance, and you'll see a lot of criminals with tattoos like this. This tattoo on me says mom on my chest. And a lot of criminals will do things like that, right? Is that they really they have a sentimental side to them. And because people will see that sentimental side, they'll think, oh, wow, this guy's actually a good guy. But if you remember fragmentation, where criminals have a tendency to, move from one thing to the next in their thinking, concrete thinking, they can't understand how their sentimentality applies in multiple positions. And also remember the cutoff mechanism, that I can feel very badly and be very sentimental and cut it off like this. That's what criminals do. The sentimentality, let me see if we have it here. We don't have it in here, but criminals tend to see themselves as good people. Right? They will focus on those moments of sentimentality. They will focus on how they held the door open for, an elderly woman, or how they gave somebody a ride, ignoring, of course, all the times they've robbed somebody or shot somebody or just hurt somebody for no reason. But they tend to see themselves as good people. And the doctors are adamant that you have to get the criminals beyond that. Criminals need to understand that they are not good people, not at all. We included this one here, ownership. Ownership is actually a thinking error put forward by Dr. Greg Walters. And ownership is that there is a presumption of ownership implicit in the very way the criminal conducts himself. Whether it is with respect to people or property, the criminal acts as if everything is his for his taking. No, this actually, I'm sorry. I apologize. This is from the doctors. Dr. Walters, his theory, it was his word for this was entitlement, which is basically the same idea. Criminals feel very entitled. So he says this is owing, we wrote, this is owing primarily to the criminal's hyper developed sense of entitlement. He does not think in terms of earning and acquiring as the non criminal does. Rather, the criminal thinks in terms of wanting and having, and the two are virtually synonymous in his mind. Yes, I want it, therefore I should have it, therefore it's mine. And there's also no separation from wants and needs. If I want it, that means I need it. And given that I need it, I should have it. And given that I should have it, it's mine and I need to go take it. That is the essence of the thought process that is taking place there. The next one that we have here is lack of time perspective. The criminal's view very little in the future can compete with excitement now. I've already kind of covered that. We put lack of empathy. Now, the doctors, they don't use the term empathy because they don't want to talk to criminals in terms of feelings, because the criminal uses his feelings to justify a whole lot. Well, I was angry. Well, I was sad. Well, I was depressed. And so the doctors emphasize that it's a huge mistake to talk to criminals in terms of feelings. But we decided to use the term empathy just because, well, I'll just read it to you. Strictly speaking, the doctors did not identify lack of empathy as a criminal thinking error. They intentionally chose to avoid the term empathy because it tends to be associated with an understanding of another's emotional state rather than his thinking. And experience has taught the doctors that it is a mistake to talk to the criminal in terms of feelings. In fact, the doctors took pains throughout the criminal personality to de-emphasize feelings. They want to elevate thought over feelings. So they were far more concerned with how the criminal thinks than with how he feels. And in an effort to underscore that point, the doctors chose to discuss the criminal's disregard for others as two more or less separate thinking errors: the failure to put oneself in another's position and failure to consider injury to others. We put that we do not disagree with the doctor's approach or their reasoning, but we can't help think that dealing with the topic in this way is to make a bit of a distinction without a difference. Criminals don't see things from the perspectives of other people. They don't think about the pain and suffering that other people are going through. They don't think about the harm that they're causing. It's all about me, what I want right now. So my hope is that as we've gone through these, that maybe you will look some of these thinking errors up from Dr. Samenow and Dr. Yokelson, Yochelson. I really, really hope that you will look these up and study them. I want you to keep the continuum in mind, that while you may have these, the criminals have them to the extreme. And also notice how they work with each other, these criminal thinking errors. They're patterns of thought that are intermingled, influence each other, and account for the way the criminal thinks. And it's very important not to think of these criminal thinking errors in terms of mental illness that the criminal has. The problem is, first of all, criminals make choices. And as I came to have these thought processes, I can change them. That's the first thing. But talking in terms of mental illness, now the criminal thinks he's a victim again. Remember, victim stance. We don't want criminals thinking that they're victims. No name. Do all criminals think the same in terms of thought processes? Yes. But remember, we're talking about patterns of thinking. We're not talking about content. So the content can take different forms, but fundamentally, the thinking processes are very, very, very much the same. Let me see if we've got any questions. Mr. Deagle says, is it just a question of degree to which they commit these thinking errors? I think that, well, they're to a different degree, but there's also an emphasis where one guy might commit more of these than those. But I think that, yeah, there's different degrees, but it has to hit a certain degree to allow somebody to engage in the type of rights violating behaviors that is indicative of criminals. Criminals also crave excitement. right? So it's not like, okay, I need money, so I have to commit a crime. It's, I like the excitement of the robbery. I liked the excitement of carrying a gun with me. I found it very exciting. Not only exciting, but also remember the power thrust. I could assert my dominance in any situation, at least in my own head, because of the super optimism, right? So I saw myself as unstoppable. I saw myself as being able to assert dominance, and I was getting this sense of excitement constantly. Something else that we didn't cover in there, but it's worth noting, is that criminals do not like to put forth effort. Very, very anti-effort. We to anticipate tomorrow's episode, I'm just going to, we summarized the doctor's framework. In the 17 years that Doctors Yokelson and Samenow conducted the St. Elizabeth study, they developed a definite framework of ideas, principles, and approaches that they demonstrated can work with offenders. And although it would be impossible for us to lay out the doctor's entire framework here, we think it is important that we at least provide a sketch of what we see as that framework's basic structure. These include 6 pillars that not only address the fundamental barriers to change, but also support the view that criminals are individuals both responsible for their conduct and capable of change. We label these the inviolability of choice, reason over emotion, inculcating a healthy sense of guilt, confronting misbehaviors and thinking errors, repetitionness, and clarifying self-interest. That is the framework. We're going to get into it a little bit more tomorrow. We'll delve into each of those. That's the framework that the doctors operate from for programming. Importantly, Dr. Stanton Samenow not only wrote a review of this book, a positive review of it in Psychology Today magazine, which, by the way, I'm going to go get, and I'll share it on social media, his review of our book. Not only did he do that, but he included us in the final edition of his book, The Criminal Person. Inside the Criminal Mind. And Dr. Samenow, after reading this book, sent an email to my friend Subby that said, these guys, meaning Brett McCall and myself, explain Samenow and Yokelson better than do Samenow and Yokelson. So I'm just going to tell you, I think I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this stuff. I lived life as a criminal. I was raised by criminals. I had criminal friends. I spent 25 years in prison. I've got an associate's degree in psychology. I've taken every program that they had. I've run programs, and I've read a tremendous amount of information on criminal thinking and criminal behavior. No name. So now you're asking me, what about a kleptomaniac? So I want you to think in terms of principle, no name, right? Because you're going to, otherwise, every different thing you're going to say, what about this guy? What about this guy? What about this guy? What about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? People who are criminals, and by criminal, I don't mean they filched the pen from work. I don't mean that they ran a traffic light or they had a bar fight. I'm talking about people that live the criminal lifestyle, and that would include a kleptomaniac. They all engage in these thought processes. All of them. You have to think in principle, and they all engage in these thought processes to an extreme degree. Let me find this. I want to do this while you guys are here. I'm going to share this to both X and Facebook. This is the review of Dr. Stanton Samenow of Down the Rabbit Hole, so you can check it out. I think I will also try to find, if they've got them listed, a complete listing of the criminal thinking errors, and I will post that as well. So I hope you got something out of this episode. We will continue our talk tomorrow. We maybe have to go Friday as well. That's fine with me. Please bring any questions that you have. I'm happy to interrupt. And I really appreciate the conversation. I really appreciate the views. Thank you all so much. Please join me tomorrow here on Everyday Ethics. I think that we can all grow together. Thank you so much. Deeper with Diego talking about Leonard Peikoff says he thinks it was his 88 talk on thinking in principles. Katrin Kohler says that she really enjoyed this episode. Thank you, Katrin, ever so much. Okay, I will see you tomorrow. Check out the Capitalist Corner as well, and also check out the Rational Egoist. Thank you, everybody.